Sixers fans, how we feeling out there? Hey y'all, my name is Lauren Gordon. Some of you may already know me on social media as Lauren Fan of the Year. Others may have just stumbled upon this podcast. But either way, I want to first thank all of you for tuning in to episode 10 of my very first podcast, I'm Just a Sixers Fan, the Lauren Fan of the Year story. Now let's continue the story. Y'all, I ended episode 9 with our Sixers ending the 2014-2015 season with an 18-64 record. Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors would win their first NBA championship since 1975. Former Sixer Andre Iguodala would win NBA Finals MVP despite not being a starter until the NBA Finals. Also, during that month, I was invited to attend another Sixers season ticket holders event at the Wells Fargo Center. Kendall and I would attend, and like we do at all of the events, we would grab a plate of food, I would redeem my drink ticket, and we would mingle amongst the other season ticket holders along with the Sixers sales and service reps. While standing off to the side of the room, I would notice Moses Malone. I enthusiastically waved to him, snapping a bunch of pictures as he walked by. It's always easy to recognize the players because of their height. They can never just blend in with the crowd. And just like I noticed Moses, so did everyone else. And he grew quite a crowd around him. We stood off to the side and I just watched Moses from about 25 feet away. I was in awe. I told Kendall, that's frickin' Moses Malone. He took us to the promised land and helped get us a championship. I remember standing off to the side, chatting with Kendall, pointing out Moses, when I just so happened to look behind me. Standing off to himself was someone who I recognized, but it took a second for it to register, and then I blurted out, "Oh my goodness, Kendall, that's Bobby Jones." So like a little kid and kind of giggly, I ran up to him and said, "Oh my God, are you Bobby Jones?" And he smiled and confirmed what I already knew. What was nice was I didn't even have to fight through a crowd. It was just Bobby, Kendall, and me chatting it up. I was almost brought to tears with happiness because I was in the same room as Moses Malone and Bobby Jones. These were the guys who got us to an NBA championship. And these were the guys that I watched on television or from the nosebleed seats at the Spectrum. And here I was having a conversation with Bobby Jones. With Kendall by my side, I was able to tell Bobby Jones exactly how much he meant to me and what a privilege it was for me to finally meet him in person. I asked if we could take a photo, which he happily agreed to. Y'all, Bobby Jones is so sweet. He's so kind. He's humbled. He's a soft-spoken man, but at the same time, he had such a strong, confident presence about him. I always loved Bobby Jones, and I was sure to let him know it. At the end of the event, all of the season ticket holders were asked to sit in the arena when Embiid, Nerlens, and Jeremy Grant would come out on stage, which was set up on the actual basketball court. They would give us fans a first look at the new jerseys for the upcoming season. It wasn't anything exciting. It was the white jersey with Phila across the chest in blue, the blue jersey with Phila across the chest in white, and the red jersey with Sixers in white. And y'all, aside from the Black Iverson era jerseys, the red jerseys that have Sixers across the chest in white is my favorite. So the players were up on the stage and they would do a little Q&A with the fans. And overall, it was just a great evening and such an awesome event. But for me, the highlight was seeing Moses Malone and speaking with Bobby Jones. I would make that photo of Bobby Jones and me as my cell phone lock screen. And of course, I would share that photo on Facebook for all my friends to see. Did y'all know that Bobby Jones was the first player to win the NBA Six-Man Award? Yep. Later that month, Kendall and I would run into Jakar Sampson, remember him, at the King of Prussia Mall food court. We didn't bother him while he was eating with his friends, as I'm always respectful to players and celebrities that I meet when they are, out eating or with their family. But we would run into him again in the mall, and we told him that we were huge Sixers fans, and he could tell because I was wearing Sixers gear, of course. We were just excited to see one of our Sixers in the mall, and Kendall asked him if he would take a photo with her, and Jakar Sampson was super cool and said, of course. For the NBA draft, our Philadelphia 76ers would have the third pick. As a season ticket holder, I was invited to the draft party. My daughters, Kirby, Kendall, and I would head to the draft party. I think it was at Dilworth Park. I believe so. And I remember telling the girls on the drive down that I wanted D'Angelo Russell or Emmanuel Mudiay. I felt like the Sixers, we just needed a guard. And to me, it just made sense. And y'all, we got there and the draft party was nice. They had lots of handouts and giveaways. There were food vendors. There were big screens that would show the NBA draft live broadcast. And the weather was warm, but there was an overcast. And I remember it started to rain, hard, downpour. So Kendall, Kirby, and I would gather up under a tent where we saw Mark Zumoff getting mic'd up. And y'all will never believe who walked under the tent for a live interview with Mark Zumoff. None other than Julius Dr. J. Irving. So, of course, I began snapping lots of pictures. And again, I was in awe that I was underneath the same tent as the legendary Sixers play-by-play announcer Mark Zumoff and NBA legend and Hall of Famer Dr. J. The NBA draft began, and with the number one pick, the Minnesota Timberwolves would select Karl Anthony Towns. The Los Angeles Lakers would select D'Angelo Russell with the number 2 pick. And with the third pick, our Philadelphia 76ers would select Jahlil Okafor. Again, I didn't understand why the heck would we select 3 players who pretty much played the same position, Nerlens, Embiid, and now Okafor? I did not want Okafor. I wanted a guard. I would hear people say, well, you got to pick the best player available. I didn't necessarily think that was Jahlil Okafor. So once again, I was disappointed, and I was kind of glad it was raining because then no one could see my tears. But y'all, in July of 2015, we would pick up Nick Stauskas, aka Sauce Castillo. And he wasn't necessarily a great player, but I was just happy that we picked up a shooter. Okay, I told y'all that growing up, I was fortunate to be raised and loved by 2 incredible men, my birth father and my dad, who was my mom's husband. So my father was married to Nina, who was my bonus mom. And my mother was married to my bonus dad. So I hope that isn't too confusing. Well, in July of 2015, my bonus mom, Nina, told me that my daddy, who is my birth father, was sick. And I would talk to my daddy on the phone and I would go visit him. And then he was admitted to the hospital. And I remember visiting him at the hospital. And while I was there, he told me he was being discharged and he was going home. So I just assumed they were allowing him to go home because he was feeling better. And I remember once he got home and he got settled, I stopped by to check on him. And there was a nurse there. And I could see that Nina was very somber. And I immediately sensed something was wrong. So I asked for privacy for just Daddy and me. And I looked him right in his eyes and I asked him, what is going on? And at that point, he told me he had stage 4 cancer. And I just felt like the floor just opened and just sucked me in. I wanted to cry, but I wanted to be strong for him. So every day I would go to his house and spend time with him. And Larry and the kids would come by to see him. And 7 days from the date that I heard the news that my father had cancer, he had passed. And Nina and I were there as he took his last breath. And I remember holding his left hand and Nina was holding his right. And I was sad to lose my daddy. That last week that I got to spend with my father, I witnessed firsthand the pain and agony that he was in and the toll that cancer had taken on his body. So, although I was sad to lose my daddy, in a strange way, I was relieved that he would experience no more pain. And remember in episode 8, I told y'all about Daddy and Nina coming to the game with us when I met Allen Iverson for the first time? Well, that was in January of 2014. It wasn't even a year and a half ago. And remember that I shared that at that time, how Daddy missed out on meeting AI because he said he was comfortable watching the game from right where we sat and didn't want to walk around the Wells Fargo Center with us. Well, I realized later, obviously, he probably knew then that he was sick and just didn't say anything. And that made me sad. Whew. So I lost my father in July of 2015. And in September of 2015, I would learn that Moses Malone had passed. And that hit hard, probably because I was still grieving Daddy, and I thought about how I had just seen Moses at the season ticket holder event just a few months earlier. And I remember also in that same month, we would sign TJ McConnell. Going into the 2015-2016 season, I wanted to build Sixers enthusiasm. So I began making lots of Sixers Facebook posts. I would give my Facebook friends a glimpse into the life as a Sixers fan. I'd make posts and share photos and videos of me at the game with the players. I wanted to share my passion as a Sixers fan. And even though there weren't a lot of people at the games, I wanted everyone to see how great the players were. They were still competitive every game and they wanted to win. So I would always root for the guys and I defended the Sixers every chance I had, especially with my high school friend Chuck, who would remind me on Facebook every chance that he had that the Sixers suck. Lauren, they're not going to win anything. He would post stuff like that on my timeline. And I would remind him that his team was trash and that the Knicks were also in the gutter with us, but at least we had a plan. We had a process. It was all in good fun. Time would go by and I wouldn't hear anything from Chuck. But you better believe every time the Sixers played the Knicks, I would hear from Chuck. He would post something smart or something funny on my Facebook timeline. Whenever we played each other, we would bet which team would win. The loser would have to wear the other team's shirt or jersey, take a photo, and make it their Facebook profile picture for a week. Chuck and I have been doing silly stuff like this since high school, and now we were grown with daughters of our own, and we would get our girls involved as well. It was nice to pass this rivalry down to the next generation. Y'all, as time went on, I became more and more obsessed with the Sixers. I met a few players. I met some Sixers legends. I was a season ticket holder. I went to a lot of private events, and I found myself building my Sixers collection. T-shirts, jerseys, giveaways. If it had the Sixers logo, I wanted it. It was to the point where I was wearing Sixers gear every day. It was important for me to rep my team every single day. Sixers t-shirts, sweats, jerseys, hats, vests, jackets, you name it, I had it. In fact, let me rewind a little bit. In 2014, I brought a brand new 2015 Kia Optima right off the showroom floor. Why a Kia, you may ask? Because y'all, it was the official car of the NBA, that's why. And I would get a customized vanity license plate, Sixers fan, 6 ERZFAN, Sixers fan. And after a while, everyone began associating me with being that Sixers fan. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy from when I was a kid, when I believed that no one could out-Sixers me and that I was the biggest Sixers fan in the world. Well, now not only did I believe it, but other people would also begin to notice. Not only did I feel like a self-appointed Sixers ambassador, I felt like I was an advocate for the Sixers. And just like when I was younger, I had no problem defending the Sixers' honor. One time I went into a local sports bar and they had banners of every Philly sports team except the Sixers. I took it personal, so I asked to speak to a manager, and I asked him, how come there's no Sixers flags? And he told me that the next time I came there, they would have a Sixers banner. So I returned a month later, and there was still no Sixers banner. So I turned around and I left, and I refused to patronize that franchise. I didn't make a scene. I just left. I choose where I spend my money. And fast forward to present day, can y'all believe they still do not have a Sixers banner in their establishment, despite the success of the Sixers over the years? I know not patronizing a sports bar because they don't rep the Sixers may seem petty, but to me, y'all, it was personal. In October, Kendall and I would attend another season ticket holder event in Philly where we would meet the rookies. It would be the first time the fans would meet Jahlil Okafor, Richaun Holmes, Kendall Marshall, and Carl Landry. They were cool. And even though I wanted Russell or Mudiay, I was happy to have these guys on my team. It's like once a player is on our team and they wear the Sixers jersey, I have no choice but to embrace them because they become one of us. Well, Kendall and I would take photos of us at the Sixers podium and with the players. Again, another great time at another season ticket holder event. Even though our team wasn't built to win, it was still fun going to the games because it was always entertaining, especially watching the game with Susan, Dennis, and the other season ticket holders in our section. I remember one game, Patti LaBelle singing the national anthem. This was great live entertainment, and we were losing games, but the guys on the roster always gave 110%, and they always played hard. and I always cheered them on. I remember in November, Jalil Okafor would get into that street fight after our loss in Boston. Remember that? When TMZ dropped that video, I cringed and I was like, dear God, he's not going to be around long. But at the same time, we had to remember he was only 19 years old. On December 1st, Kobe would play his last NBA game in the Wells Fargo Center. I was grateful to be there to see it live. Again, even though we weren't winning games, it was moments like that that made it worth being a season ticket holder. A lot of fans weren't as patient with the process as me. Patience was wearing thin at the idea of us losing games in order to build through the lottery with draft picks. I remember in December, Sixers CEO Scott O'Neal had a town hall with the season ticket holders. And man, let me tell y'all, the fans did not hold back. It was to the point where I kind of felt bad for the guy. To his credit, he answered every question. And when some of the questions included some attitude or a lot of emotions, Scott O'Neal remained calm, cool, and collected. And he answered the questions with empathy for us fans. After the meeting, Kendall and I would approach Scott O'Neal, and I told him that I appreciated the town hall and respected how he was graced under fire. Kendall and I would take a photo with Scott O'Neal, and of course, I'd later share it on Facebook and add it to my growing Sixers collection. In December, Kendall would have the opportunity to appear on the Wells Fargo Jumbotron and announce Robert Covington during the starter lineup. And 4 other children would also appear and each announce a starter. What an amazing opportunity, right? Y'all, that game was also memorable because that was another game that Kendall, Larry, and I would sit with cousin from Virginia and AI in his suite. Kendall and I would sit directly in front of Alan and cheer on our Sixers, and I felt like I was living the dream. Thanks to my in-law cousin, we spent time being around Allen Iverson. We would be invited to his suite during the games whenever he was in town. We would be invited to events hosted by Iverson, and I always felt fortunate to be around him. At the end of the day, Iverson is a normal, down-to-earth guy, but y'all, I was a fan, and I had to make a conscious effort to not fan out whenever I was around him. I knew he trusted us off the strength of cousin, and I never took that lightly. Everyone knows that I love taking pictures, like lots of pictures, and whenever I was around Alan, I was always mindful to not be that fan, that's constantly snapping pictures. And I wanted him to just be himself when I was around him. But internally, y'all, my inner fandom would be like exploding. And I remember one time, Larry, Kendall, and I was in the elevator with cousin and Iverson. And I was like, oh my God, I'm riding in the same elevator as Allen Iverson. Y'all don't understand. This is someone who I was obsessed with during his career as a Sixer. What I loved when I was around Allen was how fans reacted when they would meet him. I would tell them, I know, because I could relate to their excitement. And people would try to be nice to us because they saw it as an opportunity to get close to Iverson. And that's when I realized the real power of association. Like, you don't have to be famous, but if you're with someone famous, people treat you a lot differently. And being around Alan, what I also noticed was how he interacted with children. Y'all have to remember, a lot of these kids were too young to remember AI in his prime, but they knew who Allen Iverson was. And he always took time to talk to the kids. And he was always just cool, chill. I mentioned in episode 8 that Alan is funny and he's a great storyteller. I would try not to just stare at him because I didn't want him thinking I was weird. So I would try to just blend in with his family and friends and not stand out as the crazy fan. But y'all, for real, it would be hard to contain. How many people can actually say they spent time with their favorite celebrity or athlete? And I've heard stories of people holding a celebrity or an athlete to high regard. And then when they meet them in person, they turn out to be an asshole, right? But y'all, Iverson was always exactly the person who I thought he'd be. And that just made me love him even more. On Christmas Eve, I was excited that we got Ish Smith back. But I admit I was sad that we waived Tony Roten. Y'all, Tony Roten would also be credited with the Sixers term, trust the process. Around this time was when we started hearing Adam Silver, who was the new commissioner, who recently replaced David Stern, that he wasn't happy with Sam Hinkie and the idea of intentionally tanking. This was not a good look for the league. And here's the thing, y'all. What Sam Hinkie was doing, it wasn't illegal. He wasn't breaking any rules. He found a loophole, and it was definitely frowned upon. And we had good players, and the players played hard, but they were definitely set up to fail. I wasn't happy with the idea of tanking either, but I was okay with tearing down everything and rebuilding, especially if the vision was that we would win multiple championships down the road. So as a fan, I was willing to be patient. Well, Adam Silver would assign Jerry Colangelo to the Sixers management, and Jerry would add his son Brian. Trust me, I'll go in more detail about those Colangelos later in an upcoming episode. I remember thinking during this time that things could not possibly get worse. Remember at the end of episode 9, I said, there's no way we would go worse than an 18-64 record, right? Y'all, we would end the 2015-2016 regular season with a 10-72 record. 10 games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games, y'all, out of 82. We only won 10 freaking games that season. Now, where do we go from here?